We're good. It's
Okay.
not too bad. It was a beautiful day yesterday. Today it's windy and cold.
Yeah, that's the city for you.
I know. There you go.
But when do you guys go to yellow, or are you already in yellow?
Yellow.
We're in yellow. We got into yellow last week.
Okay.
But everything still remains closed. I mean, most of the retail's closed. And then they just, Edgewood yesterday, they just canceled the community days. Fireworks are all canceled. All of the pools are closed for the summer. So I don't think it's going to be much different red to yellow.
Mhm.
Except people will be allowed to see each other.
Yeah, well,
Right.
I think that's happened, honestly, is, again, just by nature of social creatures.
Right.
But anyway, are we?
And so we're good to go.
Okay, we're good to go.
We're in good shape.
Good
Our
shape.
live stream's
Mike, if
rolling.
you need it.
Okay.
All right, we will call this May 19th or May 18th, 2020 meeting, May 19th, 2020 meeting of the Lawrence County Retirement Board to order. Vanessa, please call the roll.
Controller Gettings,
Here.
President Repellum,
Present.
Commissioner Spielvogel,
Here.
Commissioner Vogler,
Here.
Commissioner Boyd.
Here. We have a quorum. See if there's any public comment. I'll note, just for the record, this meeting is being live streamed and broadcast on the county's YouTube page to accommodate the Sunshine Act during these trying times. Any member of the public wishing to participate in the meeting can do so by viewing the county's YouTube page, where again this meeting is being broadcast. And if they want to submit public comment for the record, they can do so by submitting that comment to mboyd@co.lawrence.pa.us. Meeting's also being recorded internally for our purposes and compiling the minutes. We'll see if we have any public comment. You're gonna have to give me a second. The internet down here is a little slow. Putting this on my phone. I have a computer right in front of me.
We're a little sidetracked in this.
Oh yeah,
Day felt.
very nice. Apologize for the delay here.
We lose Sarah.
No, I just switched over to
Oh, okay.
check the public comment. All right, we have no public comment. So with that being said, Sarah,
Yeah.
we'll turn the meeting over to you. How are our finances looking?
Good morning. So what I thought we'll do is we'll go through the quarterly report, and then we're going to go through what we've done in the last 6 weeks on getting you back into target. So I'm going to share the screen, and we are going to go into here, and we're going to go. All right. So we are on the quarterly report. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. You're gonna have to bear with me. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit. Just want to give you a quick Marquette update. Just so you know, we were a quality leader. Greenwich did us a survey, and we came out as one of their quality leaders overall for U.S. investment consultants. Just so you know that we are all working via being at home. But we have hired a number of employees, so we're still growing. We've had about 12 new accounts in the past quarter, and we continue to work on home. Chicago will start coming back 20%, and Westchester, because they are in red, is closed, and so is our Baltimore office. But we're still having our investment committee meetings. Everything, it's just via being on Teams. As we go down, let's talk a little bit about what happened in the market for the first quarter. As you know, economic activity has ground to a halt amid the global corona pandemic, with real GDP declining at 4.8 in the first quarter. Economists expect a staggering 25.3% contraction in the second quarter before a rebound in the second half of the year. Of course, that being said, we're going to see what happens with the market and with the economy. At this time, the range of possible outcomes is incredibly wide amid a myriad of unknowns. Current forecasts for economic growth vary widely given the enormous uncertainty. We're going to see what happens in July 15th once that unemployment, that additional 600 a week happens, and see how the economy goes with states reopening. If you go look at below, you can see the quarterly economic projections, and I thought this was interesting. So let's just take JP Morgan. So the first quarter, they said they're going to be about down 10%. Second quarter, they're going to be about 25%, but they're hoping that in the third quarter and the fourth quarter that they're going to come back. And you really see that throughout some of those financial industries, but you can notice that Bank of America, and along with Barclays, is really expecting a low third and fourth quarter. We go look at what's happened with consumption and go to the second page. The unemployment has deteriorated at a historic pace, with more than half of those unemployed being
Sarah.
affected by the Yes.
Sir, I want to interrupt you for a second. Would you be able to scroll on your screen down to where you're at in the presentation?
Okay, right there. Can you see the hand?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. With more than half of those unemployed being affected by the pandemic, we know the service
Tell her overseas
industry.
Wait, hang on. We're still on. So what we can see is the first page where just at the top where it says Marquette and Associates, Lawrence County, Sarah Wilson, Michael Schoen, April 1, 2020. Is that where you're at?
No, we're on, let's take that one off. We want to go to this one. Are you on here?
No.
Can you see the pie chart?
No, I can't. I can see your hand moving around, but the paper is not
Okay.
it's not moving
Let's
with it.
go back to this. I apologize. Can you see this now?
What'd you say? I'm not.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay, let's go back up, and I really will apologize about that.
Now it's scrolling, so I think we're in good shape.
Okay, so let's just look quickly at the Marquette update, just because I went through that with you. You can see we've grown. We've also done some recent hires. We've hired about 12 people, even during the pandemic. Some of them we're bringing on virtually. Some of them we're waiting until the office opens. We are currently in search for the OCIO, head of OCIO. And so that will be an executive director leading that group there. And we've also had about 12 new accounts even throughout being closed. And you can also see that we, Greenwich, made us a quality leader in overall U.S. investment consulting within the large firm category. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that market. So when I first talked about the market, we're on U.S. economy. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So one of the interesting things is we know that there's been a contraction. GDP has declined by 4.8%. We expect it to be a staggering 25.3% in the second quarter before a rebound in the second half of the year. But that's still a huge unknown. And then when we look at this, look below, you can see that the firms, first, second, third, and fourth quarter, what they're expecting to happen. So second quarter we know is going to be very ugly with economic projections. We see some of them hopefully coming back in third and fourth quarter. So the minimum we think they're going to come back is 0. The maximum we think for the third quarter, they're going to come back about 29.2. And then we see the fourth quarter starting to taper off again, because we believe that if the virus comes back in fall, and states start going back to yellow, possibly red, that's going to really have an effect on where we see the economic projections. Now we go back here and we can see this. We can see consumption and unemployment has deteriorated, with more than half of those unemployed being affected by the pandemic. The service industry, which is typically less cyclical than manufacturing sector, has seen a large slowdown, though there's an incredible variation across sectors. And if you look at the coronavirus, this right here, you can see income or hours reduced at 31%, temporarily or permanently laid off is about 18%. And we're gonna see this part is gonna really start actually getting larger. And we believe that we will see that with the service industry, meaning smaller restaurants and bars are gonna just permanently close. We've seen an increase in hours only by 6%, and no impact to employment or income is only at 35%. The oil and gas industry has been a large driver of capital spending, and therefore employment and income growth during that recent economic there's been some expansion. We've actually seen the oil prices have dropped dramatically, but they are starting to go up. We look at the service industry impact, and I thought this was really a good thing to look at. Look at air travel, 80%, recreational services, 87%, hotels, 72%. So when we look at what has completely happened, you're going to see that we're seeing it in our counties. Not only are you seeing that impact of employees not working, those not opening, you're going to see it in the impact on when you, with taxes as well. So we look at the actions, both fiscal and monetarily, implemented by policymakers in an attempt to offset the economic downturn have been stunning in scope and scale. We looked at what happened with the first set of stimulus, and while that has put money into Americans' pockets and that needed to happen, we're also going to look at how we're going to pay for this down the road in the next 1 to 3 years. You know, with federal taxes are possibly or probably going to go up. Their policymakers are attempting to replace lost income for both consumers and employees, providing a bridge until economic normalcy returns, so that the liquidity crisis does not develop into insolvency crisis. Now look at where we are in the federal balance sheet. I mean, look at that, trillions of dollars going up. And then we talked about the loan loss provisions among major banks. So they really are expecting for the first quarter what they were expecting in loss, and then we go look at the second quarter. We look at first quarter 2019. You can see they were fairly thinking there wasn't going to be as much, and now we look at first quarter 2020. That is going to grow, we believe, in second and third quarter. Are there any questions so far?
No.
All right. Okay, so we look at growth outside the U.S. experiencing historic contraction as well. We will see that also when we look at how international, the international markets did. It's important to note that the IMF forecast assumes the pandemic fades in the second half of the year, with containment efforts being gradually lifted. We go look at the growth estimates, and we go look at where we were as of January 2020, so that's the gray bars. Go look at where we are in April of 2020. You can see that China looks like it's going to grow. You know, that is subject to change when we look at that, due to the fact that we're not necessarily sure that that's correct. And so we look at global equities. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, they're cutting down all the trees, so I'm actually gonna, great, lovely Duquesne light. So I'm gonna actually move to the other end of the office. You have to excuse me. So now we look at U.S. equity markets. A decline in first quarter, we know we saw that, ending the quarter deep in red. Interesting, however, more defensive areas of the market did not provide as much downside projection. So we are going to talk about that. Value, as we know, in down markets is supposed to outperform. They did not. What happened was a lot of managers decided to try and seek any kind of return, so they actually went towards growth stocks. Defensive names only slightly bested the broad market, outperforming by just 3 percentage points as measured by the Russell 3000, despite the broad market declining more than 20%. This was largely due to February, which saw defensive names perform essentially in line with the broad market. So value kind of came back. Defensive stocks kind of came back a little bit, but wasn't enough to do, and we'll see that in the returns. Growth stocks, as I said, outperformed value stocks in the first quarter, which we would not have expected to happen. We're going to talk a little bit about this because what we're going to do is that we've always taken a value over tilt, but with this value tilt, we're going to start scaling that back and possibly looking at going more into a growth tilt. Look at how the market did. We look at consume energy. Energy, as we know, was down 52% for the quarter, 55% for the trailing 1 year, March to March. We look at financials, and then look at healthcare. Healthcare actually did not do that badly, and that was because of, they were increasingly needed during this pandemic. We look at information technology, actually for the year was positive at 7.2%. And we look at utilities. Utilities did not actually have that tough of a time. Are there any questions right now?
No, not right now.
And please feel free to interrupt me. I know this is kind of hard doing it terms. Fixed income is interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We saw flight to safety, saw rates fall to historic lows for intermediate long-term treasuries. That, coupled with the Federal Reserve cutting short-term rates back to zero, led to an upward sloping yield curve. Unfortunately, most fixed income managers really underperformed for the quarter. We saw this not only with your fixed income managers, we saw it across the board. Future markets are now projecting the Fed will keep rates at zero until at least March 2021. There has been talk about them going to negative. We preferably do not want to see that. High yield bonds and bank loans, for example, were deep in the red as spreads increased to the widest level since 2009. That was at the beginning of this. Towards the end of the quarter, we actually went into high yield. We believe that there is going to possibly be a way for fixed income. We did about 2% to be able to pick some yield off of that. And then just go look at the yield curve. We see where that is. When we look at fixed income, we also know that it's going to be going, we're not going to see very much return from them. So we're going to talk a little bit about diversification. And we look at the high yield spreads, but look, they started to come back a little bit, and that is going to benefit where we've put you into some high yield. And then this is just, you can see everything's in red. Are there any questions right now in the market?
What are we looking at? I know this is a question that you really can't answer, but what are we looking at long term here? Do we think the market's going to rebound? Do we think the market's going to, continue to sink? Do we think that, there's going to be an uptick and then a downtick? Where do we see the market going over the course of the next 2-3 years?
Okay, so where we see of course, there's a lot of unknown in it. What the problem is going to be is how the country gets back in, how the workforce goes back in. And then if the virus comes back. And, once there's a vaccine, I think, we'll see the market stabilize. It has stabilized and it's come back in March about 7%. I know that when I was out there for the first meeting this year, and we talked about what happened in 2019, I said, look, in the next 18 months, we're probably going to see some kind of correction. The question becomes, was that the correction that we saw this first quarter? We are tending not to believe so. While it may have corrected the market a little bit, we're going to have to deal with what's going to happen in the next 18 to 24 months from this quarter alone, from the pandemic, and from what's going to happen with the economy, with unemployment, there is major industries. Look at, travel. Look at the service industries, which is going to be all of the hotels. And then you're going to look at, with unemployment continue to increase, that we're probably going to see another correction. Hopefully, it's not going to be like the quarter we had. And, the market's kind of found its feet a little bit. We go look at where the market is. It found its feet in April. Hopefully, we're not going to see as wide swings, but I still believe that this time next year, we're going to be looking at more of a correction than we thought there was going to be.
So in other words, and I'm sure you're about to touch on this, but we need to start making the move towards even more defensive positions in the stock market.
Well, I think, we talk about looking at making more defensive moves. I think what we're going to talk about, and I'd like to come out and, do an education meeting with you, is how do we diversify the portfolio so that looking forward, we know that this is not a 5-year plan. This is a 10, 15, 20-year plan. And we look at that and, we see where that's going, and how do we carry forward? And I think that's one of the things that we would like to look at, is where your asset allocation is. We're going to make some moves in the equity positions, and I think that's going to be going a little bit more towards growth. So yes, I think we're going to have to look not as much defensively, speaking as going and looking at defensive managers, but more looking defensively in your asset allocation.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Sarah, thank you so far for everything you've provided. Notwithstanding, none of it's been very good. But to follow up on Chairman Boyd's question, which kind of asked you to look ahead, I do want to make note of the fact that everything you've referenced so far, and I think that you're going to be referencing when you start talking particularly about our fund, is the first quarter, January, February, March. Am I correct?
Yes.
Now, what I'm hoping you're able to do to the best of your ability would be to then also, if you can, give us a little bit of information on what has transpired between April 1 and today, that 6-week period that's not included in this report. If you're able to include anything along those lines, it would certainly be helpful to me, and I would assume to my colleagues. So thank you again, Sarah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I will absolutely address that. What I'd like to do is do the quarterly report, and then let's get back into where we look at April, and we do have a performance update for that.
All right, sounds good. Are there any other, before we jump into any other questions from the board? Doesn't look like there is. So we'll jump into the portfolio.
Okay, can you see the observations page?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So as of March 31st, the market value was at 73.5. The plan had a loss of 13.9%, which was 11.9 million. Now let's take a little step back, because I know that's a really large number, but go look at what you did for 2019. You returned 19.9% and had a gain of 17.4 million. So you did not give all of your gain back from 2019. And I think that's very important to be able to understand that. So yes, it was an awful quarter, but you still did not give all of that gain back. For the trailing 3 years, you've annualized to 3.2% return. You know, last quarter we were looking at that, and that was close to 7%. But you've had a gain of 7.5, and since inception, you've had an annualized return of 5% with a gain of 19.9 million. So while we've taken some of these hits, you were still up. Are there any questions on this?
No.
All right. So let's look at the equity composite return negative 22% for the quarter for trailing 12-year 11.9%. You can see below the U.S. equity was 22, global was 20, international was 26. U.S. fixed income composite returned 20.8 for the quarter, and for the trailing 1 year returned 7.9%. So making that move to fixed income really did help you. You know, when we looked at the fixed income and then actually combined with the real estate manager, JP Morgan returned 1.2 for the quarter, and for the trailing year returned 4.3. We know that JP Morgan last year had a bump of what they were holding, and then they did very well within the third and fourth quarter. Looking ahead, we're going to talk a little bit more about this at the end of the meeting, the asset allocation education, and then we're going to do a review of your investment policy. And this is really going to be once we've done some asset allocation education, when we've looked at a few different asset classes that we might want to go into, then what we'll do is making some changes to the investment policy. Do you have any questions right now?
No, not right now.
All right. Okay, so you can look at your fund balance. We looked at your, you know, the contributions, your withdrawals, and we look right there on how you did for the first quarter with your comparatively to your benchmark, and you were right on it. And then we look at 1 year, and then we look at 3 years, you were right on it, and since inception, you were right on it. And then we look at where your policy, you remained in your policy range. You were under U.S. equities, global, non-U.S. equities, U.S. fixed income. So what was a little bit above. You're going to see that this had changed because, you know, we only had those 2 weeks in the market, and then April we saw a lot of volatility. And we'll go through that when we look at the rebalance summary. So what I'd like to do is just go to how your managers did. So when we look at this, and I really want to point out this, you can sit there and say, okay, yes?
Page 7, correct?
Page, it's 25 for me. Can you see your managers?
We can see them. It's, hang on.
It says annualized returns net. Can you see my,
Yeah, I think it's page 7 for us.
okay, it's page 7 for you. So can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, great. So when you were there with U.S. equity composite, you can say, look, we're 22% down versus 20.9. That is your overall broad benchmark. Now let's go look at what your funds did. So we have to do some composite benchmark that's going to entail all of your managers and be representative. But when we look at your individual managers, let's go look at American Funds, Washington Mutual. They were only down 21% versus the market of 24%. For 5 years, they have outperformed 5.7 versus 3.2 annualized. And since inception annualized, they've done 7.1 versus 5.0. Then let's go look at Eaton Vance. So those are your two active managers in the US domestic. They were down 27.3 versus 29.7. And go look at what they did in the trailing 12 years. 15.6 versus 22.5. And then for 5 years, they were 5.9, and their benchmark was 0.5%. So they are doing exactly what we want them to do, especially in this down market. Okay, your global, we can see Dodge and Cox underperformed 3.1 versus 27.1. We would expect that in this market. They are your alpha, so we usually will see that they will do very well in an up market. In a down market, they're going to take a little bit of a hit, but we are not concerned with that. As we go look at what MFS, low volatility, did, they were down 17% versus 21.4, and then go look at 9.1 versus 11.3. Global equity had a little bit of underperformance. We know that we actually tend to lead with our global managers in we value, and we kind of expected this from them. They usually will do much better in an up market, but they're still outperforming for the 5 years. All right, we are now on the non-US equity composite. And we look here, and Hartford actually did what we wanted to do. If we had looked at Hartford through the course of years, they had a struggling 2019. We knew that. We're still very comfortable with them, and they outperformed the market 27.8 versus 28.5. Vanguard Total International Stock Index, we know that they're going to do exactly with the market. Please note that this is net of return, so you can see that 24.3 versus 24 is that, the fees are in there. We look at your real estate composite, JP Morgan, and then we look at Clarion. Clarion was funded in August. They've done 3.9 versus 2.4. We are going to actually come back to where your real estate composite is. While we've upped real estate, and that's done very well, I think when we look at doing any other kind of asset allocation, if we go into another asset class like infrastructure, we may look at lowering the percentage of the portfolio in real estate when it comes to fund that. Go look at your fixed income managers, and this is really where we look. We actually put you into the Lord Abbett High Yield. We'll talk about that. They did about 1.4% since March. And then you are right on the fixed income. You've actually outperformed your Fidelity Bond Index Fund, outperformed the ag. But when we look at the total return of fixed income, did about 2.8%. For the quarter, and for the trailing 12 months did 7.9%. Do we have any more questions on the first quarter?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Sarah, it's Richard. Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Good.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. And I am encouraged that since the inception of our plan that we have not lost everything. I do have a question for you though. Based on the previous decisions that the board made going into 2020, and then the adjustments that you made throughout that period of the pandemic, you always give us our portfolio performance percentile compared to other plans out there. How do we stand up against others?
Okay, let's go look at that. And it's going to take me a little bit of time, so we're here. So we go back, and can you see the page that I'm looking at, the bar charts?
Yes.
Graph? Okay, great. So when we look at the quarter, you were in the 52 percentile. That is not a concern. You're still doing better than 48% of your peers. We go look at where you were for the 1 year. You're ahead of your benchmark. And then let's go look at your 3 year. You're at 35 percentile. Your benchmark is at 62. So you have done better than 65% of your peers. And then we go look at inception. You're at the 23%. So you're in really good shape when we look at you in that total universe. And the benchmark was at 76 percentile. So you've done very well consistently. So we look at the time shot at that. And even though you beat your benchmark and you can say, oh, we were only at 52%, was extraordinarily a very hard quarter for every single manager. So I think you're exactly where you should be, and you're still outperforming your peers when you look at this database that we put you into.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. It's very encouraging.
And I just want to point out, it's net of fees. So when you look at that, you've got a lot of people who could be, when you look at your fee schedule and you are still at a very low fee schedule. And if you give me a moment, I'm going to go switch you to that. No. Okay, here we are. I apologize. You're still at 33 basis points. So even with adding in, real estate, which is at a 1%, we look at the Lord Abbett High Yield at 62% of the fee, 62 basis points. You're still at 33%. That is a very low fee structure. So I think you're in very good shape right now.
Thank you.
And I also think that some of the changes that the board has made over the years has really helped this portfolio, especially now. All right, so what I would like to do is I would now like to take you into, I'm going to now share with you what we did with the rebalance page. So we'll get into that. Right. Okay. Can you see that on your screen? The rebalance?
We're still on the fee schedule.
All right, let's get you out of that. Now can you see this? All right. All right, can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so due to the market volatility, the portfolio was systematically rebalanced during the month of March. The goal of the rebalancing was to bring the portfolio within the asset allocation policy ranges set forth in the investment policy statement. The portfolio on February 7th was 102 basis points overweighted equities. So we know this was prior to the market going, and we sold $1 million of U.S. equities, 113 basis points for liquidity needs. This actually did very well for you because as the market went down, you were back to target, and you could see you were at 49, and then we took you to 47.94. And this is one of the things that, if you had traditional consulting, you didn't have discretionary, you could have waited to make that change and you would have really seen the portfolio go down. So on February 21st, pre the market downturn, I say pre the market meltdown, you can see you were right in line on where we wanted you to be. And was March 13th, the portfolio was 551 basis points underweight the equities. So we sold $1 million of the Fidelity U.S. Bond Index Fund and we added 1.5% allocation, 1.1 million to Lord Abbott High Yield Fund. This was an investment committee decision. We thought that high yield bonds have become much more attractive from a valuation perspective over the past few weeks, particularly relative to core fixed income, i.e. treasuries, which we know are not yielding anything, which have seen rates fall to historic lows. This play is actually not a long term. We may move in and out of high yield, but we like high yield right now because we're able to see those managers get some yield out there to be able to buy corporate bonds and be able to go in there and see undervalued bonds and be able to get some yield with that. Currently, high yield bonds are trading with a yield premium over similar treasury bonds of about 9 percentage points. Historically, such a difference has resulted in favorable intermediate term returns for high yield relative to core fixed income, with the former outperforming the latter by an average of 4 to 6% annualized over the subsequent 5-year period. So we know we have to be in fixed income. So what we did was we said, okay, look, fixed income is not going to give you anything right now. What do we do? So that was a decision that we made as a committee. And then you can see where we rebalanced that. You can see that we have done this very slowly. You were 5.5% off here. And then we look at your real estate was a little bit overweighted, your fixed income was overweighted, and then your cash target was a little bit overweighted. So on March 19th, we sold $1 million of your Fidelity US Bond Index Fund, approximately 144 basis points for liquidity needs. Then on March 20th, what we did was you were 708 basis points underweight equities. We sold 1 million of the US bond fixed income, 151 basis points. Half of the proceeds were invested back into equities. And I think this is really important. We slowly moved back into equities. We had to keep you within your asset allocation, your rebalancing targets, and your investment policy. So we said we're going to slowly go back just so you're within your investment policy, and we haven't breached that policy. And you can see we also went into non-US equities and into global equities. Do you have any questions so far?
No.
Okay, so March 24th, what we did is we put the remaining proceeds from the March 20th sale into equities. You can see we went about 48 basis points. We did 44 into US equities, 300,000, 100,000 into global, and 118,000 into non-US equities. So you can see we're slowly trying to get closer to that target right here. And we knew that we were going to do this very slowly. So then on March 30th, we went and we knew that you were underweighted again. So we went another about 50 basis points, 51 basis points. We sold. Questions?
Can you repeat that?
Okay, so on March 30th, we looked and you were still underweight, close to 4% of your equities. So we sold 370,000 of your Fidelity US Bond Index Fund, 51 basis points. And then we put it into approximately 43 basis points into US equities, which was 310,000, and 60,000 equity points into 8 basis points into non-US equities. So you can look, you were here, 2.79 to 2.3. We had decided to do this slowly. I am sure all of you were, of the volatility. The market was up, the market was down. We found it to the point that it was so hard to go from one day to the next that actually we would get your asset allocation on Friday, and over the weekend, the investment committee, we would go in and set up your trades to go off on Monday morning just because we did not want it to move. March 31st, you can see that we got you in to your policy ranges. You were only off 2.6, negative 0.79, overweighted in real estate a little bit, overweighted in US fixed income. So we worked very hard on being able to go in and get you back into your policy ranges, but not completely take you all the way up. We always want to do that slowly. Are there any questions?
No, not right now.
Okay, then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get out of this, and if you give me a minute, I wanna get your April update for you. So let me go, open that. Then I've got that open. I will go back to you. Okay. Now we're gonna go back. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Okay, so this is your April update. And we look at it, you're at 7.5. So you're at 79 million. 79.1 million. So you have really come back from the market. You're down 7. Yes.
Do we have this page in our packets anywhere?
I can email that if you do not.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, would you be able to email us that?
Yes, absolutely.
And may
I will send that out on an email.
May I ask?
So we looked.
Forgive me. May I ask, since it was good news, could she repeat it?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, we would like the good news, don't we? I mean, wish I was on mute for the rest of it. So if we look at this, you've actually come back in April, you've done 7.5%. You have taken that loss down and you're actually at $79 million. So, you know, if we were looking at a market correction, which we thought we were going to see, and you saw this for 4 months, you wouldn't be happy, but you wouldn't be as concerned. So we have found some of the volatility has gone. You've been able to take advantage of this because you've actually, because we brought you back. Can you imagine if we hadn't brought you back to target and you were over probably close to 6% below your target ranges, you would not be seeing a 7.5% increase. So we look at your equity performance and we go look at your American funds have done well. They did 11% for the quarter. And then Eaton advanced at 13.5. You could say, well, you know, that's a SMID product. It didn't do as well in April. Year to date, it's done well, and we are expecting it's right in where we want it to be in performance. Now let's go look at Dodge and Cox. What an interesting, different story from the first quarter. Dodge and Cox underperformed in a down market. Look what they did in the above market. This is exactly why we've built this portfolio to do it. What it does, Dodge and Cox will go up in the up market, MFS low volatility will not do as well in such a big surge, but they will protect you in the down market. Non-US equities, look at Hartford Schroeder, did 8.9 versus 6.4, and Vanguard, of course, is right there. And then we're not able, as we know, that we don't do the monthly updates, but, for the real estate, but you're up about 4.2%, for JP Morgan and Clarion, 6.3. And then we look at the Lord Abbott, and this really made sense to go into this. For the month, you can see that bond index did 1.7, so that's basically what the market was doing, and the high yield did 4.5. So even with that small percentage in there, it's going to give you a little kick to fixed income. Are there any questions on this?
No, not right now.
All right, so I'm going to go back to you, and I'm going to get out of this screen, and we're going to stop sharing. And all right, so where we go from here is what I really want to talk about. Is I'd like to come out and do an education piece with you. I think that we're really at the point that we need to make some long-term decisions. I think that this portfolio has done extremely well. I think that between the last few years and the changes that the board has made has allowed you to be in the position that you're in. I'm sure if you go to some of counterparts, counties, other counties, you can see, we've seen it. We've actually had a county come to us and say, you know, we're doing an RFP. They've had very, very difficult performance. We know that counties are facing furloughs. We know that, you know, you're going to probably look at taxes, where you're going to be next year from your tax base. So what do? That's going to be a prolonged event. We would say asset allocation. We just put into some of counties, we've put in infrastructure. I think infrastructure is something that we'd like to talk to you about. We think that we would possibly fund that from real estate, but we would go through that with you. Infrastructure has got a queue right now, about 10 to 12 months. So that is why I'd like to come out and do that education with you in the next couple of weeks to get you in that queue. And the reason for infrastructure is going forward as the economy hopefully starts to come back, but we know that there's going to be infrastructure. We know that's going to be expansion. Maybe not the next 2 years, 5, 10, 15 years. Infrastructure tends to have a nice dividend yield, meaning that we will be able to take some of the cash out of there that they're making, and that will help make some of those benefit payments for you down the road. Another thing that we do have, and we can talk about, is we just, and this would take some education, is looking at a defensive equity piece for you that would go into your equities. Now that is a little bit of a hedge on this market, and that is probably a longer term. And we would look at where we would, take out, we would probably take some of that out of your international. I would say I'd like to look at where your international piece is right now. We might scale that back a little bit. So I'd like to do an asset allocation study with you and talk about that. So that's where I think we're moving forward in the next coming months. Are there any questions?
She's staying on, correct? You're staying on the call. Controller Gettings' report was sent to him today by Korn Ferry.
Yes.
He has before. You might have gotten a copy of it as well. I don't know. But you're staying on the line. Right? So Controller Gettings wants to address that as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. The only thing I would say is the board amenable to doing training sometime in mid-late June? Is everybody on board with that? Sure.
If that works with her schedule.
Is that good with you, sir?
That works for my schedule. So why don't you send me out some dates? As every conference has been canceled, I'm pretty open in June, unfortunately. So send me out some days that will work for you. It is a work session. I don't think we would, unless you would want to do it as a public and make decisions right then. So you tell me what would work for you.
Unless the board would disagree, let's just leave it as a work session and not have those decisions being made there on the spot. just because I think that'll give us time to digest the information. If
Absolutely.
we have any, questions or further areas that we want to look into, we can do that before coming together and making anything formal changes.
Correct. All right, that's great. So shoot me some dates and we'll just lock it in. I'll start putting that information together for you. And then what we'll do is we'll actually get hard copy, which will be nice.
Sounds good. Sounds like fun.
Okay.
All right.
And then,
Yes,
do
sir.
you have anything else for us on the report side?
I do not, I just say, thank you very much. We really enjoy working with all of you. If any of you have any questions at any time, just please feel free to email me, reach out to me, give me a call. I know these are trying times for the counties, and, we are going to do our best to be able, to keep this portfolio and this plan going as well as it has been.
And I'll just say thank you. I think throughout this crisis, we've gotten 2 or 3 emails from you guys a week, keeping us updated. If any questions, concerns, anything, reach out. You've reached out, you've gotten back to us immediately. I know I'm very, very happy with the
Yes.
performance and what we've seen out of Marquette. I speaking for my colleagues, everybody's nodding. We're all on the same place. So thank you guys for the job that you've done in navigating us through this.
Okay.
Yes.
But anyway, I'll turn it over to Controller Gettings.
Okay, what I wanted to talk about this morning is we have been in touch now. Hank Steele has since retired on May 1st. We had been in conversations with Hank, Dave, and I in regards to the 2020 finalization of the ADC. And we had talked with Hank prior to this, and we were getting data together, and he was getting data together. And finally, Dave Reichert this morning, in fact, emailed us that he felt there were a number of things that we should do. 3 of them that he talked about. The first one was that we need to change our assumptions on the life expectancy to the Pub 2010 Public Retirement Plans Mortality Tables. That sounds like a very interesting organization. I'm sure they have a fun annual meeting. But still, that being said, that would significantly increase our ADC, which is appropriate because basically life expectancy is getting longer. That is a thing that we must address for our retirees and making sure, we have said in the past, and I am joking so that no one takes this seriously, that when you retire, we give you cigarettes, alcohol, and anything that would decrease your life expectancy. That is not actually correct. That is a misnomer, but we do understand that the mortality that we have for our retirees is going to increase. And we must, as a responsible board, take into consideration that. Therefore, we're going to adopt, I'm suggesting today that we, number one, adopt the new tables for the mortality. That would increase our ADC up to about almost 1.5 million. In the second thought of that, excuse me, general accepted, the Government Accounting Standards Board has pronouncements. One of them is pronouncement 67 and the other one 68 in regards to discounted value of contributions made by members. And every year we must get a separate report from Korn Ferry regarding the GASB 67, 68 disclosures. This is allergies, by the way. As we look at the disclosures, one of the things that we had discussed was, since the mortality is going to increase that, we should try to get our plan into better compliance with and not have to worry about GASB 67 and 68 about the discounted value of our members' contributions or deductions. So if we did that, that significantly decreases our number, which means that we're able to take care of the mortality increases and still properly account for the items in accordance with Government Accounting Standards Board. That being said, The third item would then be to lower the interest rate from 7% to 6.75%. As Michael Schoen and I and Sarah have been in discussions prior to this, not recently, but in the last 12 months, we've talked about, we did decrease our rates from 7.5 down to 7. And that's a great move. I don't really believe, and this is my personal opinion, and I'll ask Sarah's personal opinion, or I won't give my professional opinion because I'm the county controller, not a financial advisor in this capacity, but I am not really in favor of lowering that rate down right now to 6.75, just because we're in a state of flux at the moment. Now, there can be arguments made that say we need to decrease it because the actuality of the returns is decreasing, but we're still in a flux on that, and I'm not convinced that that's absolutely correct. So what I'm going to ask the board to do today is I'm going to ask to make motions regarding the change in the new mortality tables, which would be one motion. The second motion to change how the members' accumulated deductions are valued for funding purposes to be in line with GASB 67 and 68. And then to not vote on the 7% to 6.75 now, which would give us a little bit of extra money this year since we are ending the year pretty close to even in our fund balance. And that being said, that gives the new commissioners and also the county itself a little bit of breathing room that that would give us, I think, a well-needed pause. Now, I would ask Sarah's comments, if any, regarding the 7% down to the 6.75. The other two are pretty easy. They're pretty simple. We're getting in better mortality tables, meaning that the actuaries are telling us what we should do there. I think we should adhere to that. Second of all, going from the accumulated deductions funding purposes on compliance with 67, 68 from the Government Accounting Standards Board, I think that's also a no-brainer. The third one is the only one I'm asking is not to move forward.
Well, I think that if you were to go 7 to 6.75, you're right. It's going to be a huge jump in the ADC. The only thing that I advise is any changes that you make, knowing that you're going to do 1.5 million additional to the ADC next year, is that you're able to make that payment. So
Well, let me, I didn't finish that. I'm using round numbers. It's going to be 1.5 if we go with the mortality, and it will drop to almost 600,000 if we do the accumulated deductions. So that brings us down to 600,000, which is a lot more doable this year,
right.
just because of the, we have a lot of extra things that are going on, a lot of items that we're not sure of, a lot of things that are going to be, up and down and sideways. So that's the reason that will give us probably about a $700,000 less than what we budgeted. But our budget was reopened and redone and this and that. So I think this will be a better option for us. Our ADC would then be approximately 600,000. And we've been doing that. Last year, I think we did
400, 500,000.
We did 5 or something last year. 600 would work this year, not a problem, rather than doing 1.3. 1.3 was going to stretch us. It was going to put us pretty far out.
Right.
Let me ask a question. If we make these changes with the contribution in the following year, 2021, and the years following 2021 be increased?
Not necessarily, because in essence, then the mortality tables will be in place, and they're not going to change dramatically, and they'll go differently 1 year because everybody will become a year older.
Yeah.
But the assumptions then for the accumulated deductions would be the same. They're going to be down, and unless there's half the number of employees, it wouldn't make a difference. So I don't think it's going to make a huge. I don't think it's like we're getting 1 year reprieve and then it's going to jump.
That's what
I don't see that.
Basically, I'm asking if we're
That's where you were going.
If the answer,
Yeah.
so in other words, this will save money long term.
No, I think this is going to be a more, guarded move to move forward. Then at some point in time, if we wanted to increase and we're able to increase, then we would decrease the rate a little bit and then bring it down maybe to 6.75 in the future couple of years, that might add 300,000 or 400,000 to that. And instead of being 6, it might be $1 million. But if we'd know whether that was gonna work or not.
But we can play with the rate at that point.
Right, because the point is the rates, as we've done, we've done really well, especially up until recently. Our rates that we've been meeting are 7%. And consequently, 6, 7, 5 to 7 is not gonna be a horrible difference if if we don't meet our rate a year, it does affect next year's rate. But the question is how much? We don't know that until we get to the end.
Yeah.
And
I
Sarah's
think
comment
that-
about the end of the year. Tell me what the end of the year is and I'll tell you what the answer is. I don't know and neither does she. So,
I think it's really important, and I think that if you can afford it, and actually that mortality table, if that's one thing, that's one more better thing for the plan, for the funding. You're at 7%, when we went over your PA database, you're right there where most counties are. 6.75 is golden. It's not necessarily realistic, even without this market environment in the last quarter. That's a very hard number to get to. When you look, and you also have to look at your funding. You're very well funded right now. Yes, I'd love to see you at 6.75, updated mortality. Everybody in the perfect world, but we're not in a perfect world, even outside of what happened in the first quarter. So I think if you're able to do that mortality table, I think that's great considering what's happened. And I also think that the 7 to 6.75 is something that down the road, it's every year we'll address it, but I think it's unrealistic right now too. And I think you're at a good place, as Dave said, 7%, you're at a good place.
one
That
of the
way.
things that's interesting about this, if we adopt the first 2 things I said, our ADC would be around 600,000 plus our bonds, which is, remember, we're still paying the bonds. Now, that means we would still be close to 99.4% funded.
I think that,
That's great. Now, if we do the third item, which jumps our ADC to 900,000, we drop from 99.4 funded to 96.9. So you're giving up one thing for another. So at this particular point, let's stay close to 100% and let's take our first 2 and move those directions in the proper manner, but also be cognizant of the fact of what's going to happen in the future. So I'm recommending that. In fact, I'm making a motion, and then we'll get it on the floor for discussion.
we're gonna need a second.
But yeah, after,
After we're
yes, right. I move that we adopt the new mortality tables in accordance with the Korn Ferry projections, and that be for the year 2020.
Any second?
Second.
Motion is second, any discussion? All right, hearing none. Vanessa, please call the roll.
Controller Gettings?
Yes.
Treasurer Rapone?
Yes.
Commissioner Spielvogel?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
The second motion I'm going to make is I move that the plan change how members' accumulated deductions are valued for funding purposes to be in line with GASB 67, 68 requirements.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Hearing a motion is second, is there any discussion? Hearing none, Vanessa, please call the roll.
Controller Gettings?
Yes.
Treasurer Rapone?
Yes.
Commissioner Spielvogel?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Done.
Those are unanimous. I'll get those typed up since I'm not a good typist, but we'll get that taken care of. And she's got the vote. We'll take that into consideration. I thank you. And I thank Sarah for being here today and giving us
Yes.
one final question I have. And I don't know whether you know this, but do we know what the number is on our fund as of yesterday?
I know what it is on the 15th.
Oh, that's
I'll
close
close
enough.
Friday. Let's get that for you. If you give me 1 second, I've got that. Send that out, and I will get that for you. So So you're at 77.6 as of close of Friday. So we had a little bit of market movement.
Thank you.
And that's your weekly asset allocation, which we're going to review at the investment committee that I do this today. And then we'll send that sheet out to you.
Okay, are there any more questions for Sarah? Any other business to be brought before the board?
Sorry. Thank you.
See, anything else might have something for us?
Thank you for weighing in.
He was in agreement.
Hopefully he likes what we're doing. Do we have any Disney stock?
Actually, you do, probably with the American Fund. And
Thank you for weighing in.
All right,
Okay.
it doesn't look like there's any additional public comment. And so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Hearing a motion and a second, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Lawrence County Retirement Board is adjourned. Sarah, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Sarah.
thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have a happy
you.
Memorial Day.
You
Take
too.
care.
Thank
Look forward to seeing
you.
you in June.
Okay.
Take care, bye.
All right, thank you.
Well, here's the thing. Just so.
See you later.
Good afternoon.
You too. I know. Yeah, just-
Recording, recording.
Yeah.
Hello,
ma'am.
Tom told me to talk to you.
Oh, hang on. We're being recorded.